We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome back to the Kimberly Lovey podcast. Today we speak with Priscilla Yocum, a home organizer, a wife, and a mother. She takes us through our journey of how she began her business and how it has grown and transformed over the last 10 years. If you're struggling on how to start pulling together your home and are feeling overwhelmed, Priscilla breaks it down for us. She gives you a 3-step approach on how to organize your home office, your kids' playroom, kitchen, and more. Priscilla guides you through how to create routines that enable you to maintain your spaces long term. Priscilla is launching her 5-day virtual home organizing pop-up group where she guides you through your home transformation alongside a community of people just like you. It starts October 5th, so head on over to sortedbliss.com and sign up today to join in on the action. You'll find tons of great tips and tricks on all things home organizing, so go check her out. Now, let's dive in. Priscilla, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I am super, super excited to have you on. I wanted to dive right in and ask you, how exactly did you come to start your business? Can you just walk us through that journey?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'd be happy to go into how I became a home organizer and a business owner. It was actually very accidental. I had joked when I was younger that I wanted to be a business owner, but I didn't really see how or when that would come to fruition. And in my 20s, I did a lot of executive administrative work. And then I moved into the mortgage and real estate industry, and it tanked in 2007. And so I decided to kind of reinvent myself, and I always had an interest in interior design. So I was at interior design school, and they always recommend that you kind of start getting your feet wet. So you do some intern work, or you work with some friends. And I had a really great friend who was going through a divorce. And she said, all right, I've got the house, but it doesn't feel like my house. So I kind of want to clean it out a little bit and get him out of here and make it my own. Mm-hmm. And so at the time I was newly married. I didn't have any kids. And I went in and I said, well, before we can really start doing anything decorative, we really need to kind of clean it up in here and get rid of some of the stuff. And, yes. Why are there children's crafts in, the bathroom? And I just didn't get it. And, I wasn't a mom. And so we started decluttering, and we did several rooms. And at the end, she said, at the end of our decluttering, she said, you should become an organizer. And I kind of looked at her in horror and was like, hoarders? And she looked back at me and said, no, do you think I'm a hoarder? And I'm like, no. And she's like, well, a lot of my friends, we have kids and it just gets out of hand. You need help. And I know so many people who would hire you to do exactly what you just did in my house. Forget the design stuff. This is what moms want and need. Wow. And it just kind of made me start to think. And so very innocently and naive of me, I sent out emails to local organizers to ask them if they would give me feedback on how they got into organizing. Is there a degree I need to go get? I mean, how do I make this happen? What is the roadmap to this? Because yes. The only thing was the show Hoarders, which I did not want any part of. And there was one sweet woman in Coto de Casa who responded. No one else even bothered to respond. And she was so kind. She took me out to lunch, or let me take her out to lunch. She answered all my questions and then said, if you want to do some intern work with me, I have several projects on the weekends, and just see if you have some stamina for it, because organizing for yourself is one thing, organizing for friends is another, and organizing for strangers is a whole nother level. And you should really see if that's something that feels right for you. And so I did that for several months, and I decided that I loved it. And she encouraged me to become a competitor in her market and to start organizing. And so then I was like, okay, but how do I do this? I've never started a business. This isn't like a brick and mortar.
Yes.
And so what I did is I put an advertisement in something called Plum District, which was very much like the Groupon for moms at the time, about 10 years ago. And they told me that my package, which was like 4 hours for some ungodly low rate of like $125, was high priced for their community. And I would be lucky to sell maybe 4 of them. And so we agreed to do 3 days, 72 hours with this package. And in the first 12 hours that it was released, I sold 14 of them, but I still had a full-time job. So I was like, how am I going to do this? I send the lady a message. I'm like in tears. You have to pull the ad. I cannot do any more of these. I was freaking out. But it clicked. This is something that women want. This is something that people need. And it's something that comes natural to me. And I loved it while I was doing it. And so it was kind of a no-brainer from there.
Wow, that is incredible.
Very accidental.
That is such a great story. I love that. And it's funny because you mentioned learning how to organize for other people. I think when we first were talking, I was, sharing that how do you manage around different personalities and different, even like within a home? Like, for example, if you have a couple and one person is super, super tidy, neat freak, and then they're kind of battling their spouse because the spouse is just either messy or they just love to hang on to their stuff. Like, what advice do you have for those of us that are in that situation?
Well, it's funny because of the homes that I've been in, there's almost always that mix of the tidy person and the messy person. The saying opposites attract, it really does apply in this scenario too. And I think like with anything else, when you're dating, you see it as a strength. And then when you're married, you're like, what in the heck? And so all of a sudden it has like a whole reframe to it. And so it's super common, first of all. I happen to be in one of those marriages as well. So I am the tidy person and my husband is the not tidy person. And so what I find with my clients and what I've found in my own home is that the first thing that you need to do is you need to have open communication and realistic expectations. You are not going to change an adult. It's something that they've likely been doing their whole lives. And you're not going to be able to guilt them into changing their ways either. So you have to come up with some boundaries that work for both of you and some compromises. So in the beginning, I did some really horrific things. Like my husband, his side of this is going to sound horrible. His side of the sink was so messy all the time. And after a while, when we're first together, I would clean it up. And I was like, this goes here, this goes here. He must have been busy, And then after a while, when I started getting busy, especially after kids, I just started shoving it all into the sink. Like it doesn't go on the counter, but it doesn't go in the sink. But here's what I want you to know didn't go on the counter. And he'd be like, what the heck? What are you doing? And I realized, what the heck? Like, you can't treat somebody like that. That's just not respect. And so we came up with a compromise that, his drawers, he would get more of the drawers so that he could put more of the stuff in there than I get. And then he wouldn't leave all of the stuff out. And sometimes when he leaves a thing or two out, you know what? I just got to walk past it. It's like, it doesn't look as perfectly neat as my side, but I have to walk past it. What I've done with some clients in some spaces is we've maybe given the spouse a basket or a decorative bin or some sort of container that can go in a nearby closet so that when they're tidying up a particular room, they can put the things that are out of place there without feeling like they have to go put everything back where it belongs. And then the spouse also knows where they can find the one item that they're looking for because my husband tends to leave a trail around the house. So he'll get distracted and he'll have a piece of mail and maybe a pair of socks. And all of a sudden that's a pile on a table. And then, there's a magazine and a wrench, on the table, the entry table. And so I just take those items and I put them in a bin for him, and he knows where to find them. Another compromise that I've done with clients is to give these spouses rooms that they don't have to be anyone but themselves in. So, if it's the garage and they want to keep it messy, let them have the garage. Maybe you give them a closet in the entryway where you don't look in it, you don't do anything with it, and they keep it however they want. Or maybe it's their home office. But it's, really releasing the need to control all the spaces and coming up with a compromise. And it's hard. I get it. It is, but it's part of communication.
Yeah. And I think that those are such great tips. I really love that idea. I haven't heard that before. The idea of giving them kind of a basket where you can just put it there. So at least it's organized chaos. I love that. And I know that my husband, he kind of has his designated man cave. I think kind of along those lines, I don't know if you've had any clients that, I think for us where it gets tricky is like, there's a difference between when there is junky type items that are easy to just toss versus, let's just say my husband collects movie posters. And so his collectibles are important to him. And so for us, we did use what you were saying, like the man cave. And that's where all of his posters go. And then anything excess we put in a closet. Did you have any other maybe experiences with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you had mentioned collections, and I wanted to say something about that.
Yeah.
Usually collections are an emphasis of something that is important to someone. And so you want to honor that as much as you can. I mean, you only have so much wall space for so many posters, right? And maybe it doesn't go with the whole theme of your house. So maybe they're not all over your house, but a man cave is a great place, maybe a hall, something. And then what also the benefit of actually displaying is it can do two things. One, it can curb the consumption a little bit because they see their collection. So they're able to appreciate what they have. Sometimes that doesn't work. But a lot of times I do see it does work. And this is also something that I notice works with kids and toys too. And so if they can see what they have, they're able to appreciate it and they feel less of a need to get more of it. The other thing that displaying it does is it kind of gives a certain amount of space or room for a particular collection. And so then they have to start making compromises of a one in, one out system. And it kind of becomes something that they become, it becomes their responsibility to dictate. And so I find that one, you should display it and give them a certain amount of space and let them be responsible for what's important to them or what isn't.
I love that. And I think that really does work. Going back to our collection. So my husband has his office / man cave where he has, his amount of space. And then we display one or two in our bar, like so that when people come in and he's hosting his friends at his bar, which he's very proud of his bar. He's very into all of that. It's funny because he's not a big drinker, but it's kind of his way to kind of, get to talk about it. Yeah. He likes to host and people get to see his, collection and he is proud of it. So I think that's an example of exactly what you're saying. I didn't know that was like a thing, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to hear that it's not just our family. So definitely.
No, it's not at all. And I've seen various types of collections. Some are easier to display than others. Some are more meaningful to somebody than others. But yeah, I think kind of honoring what's important to them goes a long way.
I love that. That is such a helpful tip. And it makes me feel like we're doing it sort of on the right track. And we struggled to figure that out, by the way. So for anybody listening, I definitely think that that's a really, really good tip. So I guess when I think about organizing, it's hard let's just say as the mother who is kind of responsible for all of a sudden, managing a whole house. How on earth are we supposed to not get overwhelmed by all of this stuff? Like what exactly is the first step that you would recommend to someone that is just feeling like there's too many toys, there's too much of a mess, and I just can't do it all? Where do I even begin?
Well, okay, so today, and this is really timely, I posted on my Instagram a quote, and I wish I could credit it to someone in particular, but I don't know who said it. And I looked it up and I tried to reference that person. But so forgive me if I don't know who it is, but I thought it was a beautiful, very appropriate quote. Overwhelm is the abundance we asked for. And when I see that, what it says to me is that nothing has a place in our home, in our calendar, in our mind that we didn't give permission to be there, right? So that's a hard truth. That can be kind of hard to take in, but I think if you're honest with yourself and you're able to be honest about what you wanted for your spaces and your time, that's kind of where it starts, is to say, okay, this isn't working for me. I need this to flow easier. I need this to feel less overwhelming. And so to me, like the first step is really acknowledging what's not working and what would work better for you. And then the second step is really to kind of have a vision for whatever space it is that you want to make over or to improve. And then the tangible thing, the thing that's not so like, okay, that's all great. You know, like I realize it's my fault and I realize that it could look better. Give me like a tangible. The tangible is editing. If you do nothing else in your spaces, you need to remove what doesn't belong, what is damaged, what you no longer need, love, and use. And if you'll just do that, then you have like 90% of the job done. And so I always tell my clients, you can do editing by yourself. You do not need me. You do not need anyone else to do editing. You know what doesn't belong. You know what goes in another room. You know what's damaged, and you know what you guys don't use. So that's always a good place to begin.
Wow. I love that. Like, admit you have a problem. And, it's true. I think some of us, we get caught up in the hustle bustle of our lives. And obviously with the state of affairs now, and I know you know this more than anybody, we've had time to just kind of stop and look around at our homes. So I do think that there is something to just having even just a professional say, even on this podcast, like, you know, holding the space for like, if it's not working, acknowledge it and hold yourself to decide to make the choice to clean it and carve out your time. And, you know, I think that alone, like just making a decision to proactively like go for it and declutter it as a first cursory step it's easy to do. Anyone can do it. You don't need a professional, like you're saying. Yeah. And I think, you know, the two rooms that I would be really interested in hearing your thoughts on, the two types, and we can take them one at a time. One is around like the kids' playroom, and then the other one is for the working person that has now been sequestered or pushed into creating a home office, say somebody that perhaps went into an office prior, and now they are forced to like really set up their home office. So I don't know which one you care to take, but those are the two that I'd love to get your thoughts on how to attack those spaces.
Yeah, so I love the question about the home office because I think it's so appropriate of the times. I think a lot of people are in this boat. My husband is currently having his home office in our garage. I'm currently in my home office / workout room. So, and then this was our distance learning room when my daughter's school was closed. So I totally get that a lot of people have been displaced from their offices. And what I would suggest that people do is that they pick a spot, one, that they can be, that they can use every day. So moving around is tough. You know, if you're on the couch one day, then you're on the dining room table the next. It's really hard to get into a mental space that right now I'm sitting down to work if it's kind of moving around all of the time. So I always encourage you to pick one place so that your mind, when you go to sit there, it says, I am now in work mode. The second thing that I recommend is that you set up your space very similar to the way you had it in your own office when you were at the office, meaning you need to have a place for storing supplies. You need to have a place for files. You need to have a place for garbage or recycle that's within reach. And you need to have a place for equipment. And sometimes it has to be mobile, so it can be on something like a cart. And sometimes it needs to be in a space that you're kind of transforming temporarily. But I always recommend that you set up the space kind of similar to mimicking your regular office. Of course, it's probably not going to be as big or as private or as luxurious or nice, but I think you can make it feel like your normal environment. And so I think those are really important.
You know, I'm taking notes over here because I've got to add a couple things to my home office. I'm guilty as charged. Well, I think that's really important. I love the idea of kind of having your go-to space. And I know some people don't have a lot of space. And that's why I think the need to be organized is super, super important, because if you can get everything kind of as tidied and compact as possible, then you don't need to have stuff all over the place if you can really get that right. And those are really good tips.
The less cluttered your environment is, the less distracted you are, right? So I know that this goes for children as well as adults. The more cluttered your space is, the harder it is to focus.
Absolutely.
And a lot of studies have shown that. So, keeping your workspace as neat as possible is great. I know everybody has a different definition of neat, but something that is distraction free is really great. And so I think having a place for files, a place for equipment, and a place for supplies that's just not all over the place, meaning zones, I think that really helps keep that distraction and that clutter at bay.
And where do you recommend somebody get like a home office, like filing system or supply kit, like the Container Store, Amazon? Like where are some of your favorite go-to places for these things?
Well, the Container Store is kind of like my heaven on earth. So that is my favorite place, but I understand that not everybody loves the Container Store. It can be really overwhelming for somebody who doesn't love that kind of stuff. I think Amazon has really great things for you to choose from. They have a great selection, and they send it right to your house 2 days later if you have Prime. So I think that's really great. Staples and Home Depot also have great options. And it can look different now than it used to. So first of all, not a lot of people are keeping paper files like they used to. So digital filing might be something that you're more up on. And so you might not need so much space for paper files and for, random papers and notebooks and things like that. But containers, bins, that will maybe just hold your supplies or your electronics, all the cords and things like that. Those are all really great things that you can even get at Target. So really anywhere that sells a bin with a lid, I think is a good option.
So it does not need to be expensive.
It does not need to be expensive. I do recommend that if it's going to be a part of your home and you can see it, you want it to be more on the decorative side. You probably don't want like the black plastic that's in the office or the metal. So if it has to be kind of a fixture in the home that you can see, you want it to be more on the decorative side. You're going to find more of that at the Targets, the Container Stores, and the Amazons. Mm-hmm. But if you can, and even I mentioned earlier, like a cart. So those metal carts that they have at Target and IKEA even, you could put all of your stuff on there, and then you roll it away into a closet when the day is over, and you pull it out when, it's time to work. That's also a really great way to utilize the kitchen or the dining room table, or some family area in the house.
I love that. That is such a good idea. I never thought of that. All right. Well, I have a lot of takeaways just from that. I've got some work to do.
Good.
Okay. So then here comes the dreaded playroom.
The playroom. I thought I was saving the best for last, since I feel like if there are any women listening, they're all like, yeah, whatever with the office, let's get to the playroom.
Sure.
So I have a lot of tips for the playroom. One is kind of going back to what I originally said, is to edit Do it as regularly as you can. I find that there are 2 seasons that work best. One is sometime in December, whether it be before Hanukkah or Christmas. One, because kids are more motivated knowing that they're going to get something. So, our elf on the shelf makes it a part of our tradition where he has a trash bag and he says, Santa wants you to give some toys to some kids that don't have any. In preparation for the toys that you're going to get. My kids have never been so giving in their whole life.
Oh, that is so sweet.
And so you can make it a tradition, you can work it in, but I just find it's really easy at that time of the year because they're receiving so much, they feel so much more giving. And I also feel like it kind of makes the season more beautiful too, when they're actually giving as well as receiving. Yeah. And then another season that I like to do an edit in our playroom, and my clients will hire me to do an edit, is June. So when the kids are home for the summer and you kind of want to get the playroom ready for them to be able to be entertained for a while in there. And so I find that those are 2 kind of really natural times to do some editing. And then I always tell my clients, 1, to edit regularly, and 2, to minimize the number of categories that they allow to be out at once. So a lot of times with my clients, the problem is volume. It's not just coming from them. It might be grandparents, aunts and uncles. And so the volume that comes into the house is really hard for them to control. And sometimes it's them too. It's hard to say not now or no to your kids at Target when you just want them to be quiet so you can get through the rest of the store with your latte. And so sometimes it's the parents too. But the trick is to keep the favorite categories out and really try and limit it to a few, maybe 3 to 5 categories of types of toys. And the reason for that, and I learned this actually when my daughter started going to Montessori, the kids pick up their own toys at Montessori. So when my daughter was 2, they told me, oh, she's so helpful and she loves to pick up. And I was like, what? My daughter? I repeated her name. Are you sure you're talking about the right child here? And when I went home and told my husband, he said, well, yeah, why should she? You do it all for her. So it kind of made me realize if my 2.5-year-old can clean up at school because it's expected of her, then she can really do it at home. But then I started to look around the Montessori room and I was like, well, wait a minute. They don't have a whole lot out at one time. They do a rotation of toys and activities. And so I started mimicking that with my daughter and with some of my clients, and we really found it to work. And so for instance, right now, my 7-year-old is really into Legos. She's really into her dollhouse, but not traditional way of using her dollhouse. She makes furniture and dresses for her dolls. And so she makes over the rooms. So she's outgrown the pretend play in the dollhouse. Now she's into the designer kind of living in there. And then she also really loves arts and crafts. So those categories we always have out. But there's been other one-off categories that she's had that I've rotated in and out. And it keeps things fresh for them. So they're entertained longer. They're not overwhelmed because, like adults, they get overwhelmed really easily.
They do.
And yeah, right. And so, and they're able to pick up if they can't destroy too much at one time. So, if they're able to empty out 10 bins of toys in a 1-hour period, which, let's be honest, they can actually do that in probably about 10 minutes. It takes a long time to clean that up. But if they really only have 3 bins of toys, it's a lot easier for them to be participants in the cleanup. And so I always recommend to my clients to start with the editing. Edit out the broken toys, the party favors, the meal toy that they got, the junk stuff. Narrow it down to the activities or toys that they value the most, and keep a few of those out at a time. Put the others up high in a closet in bins where you can rotate the bins in. And then to participate, the final thing is to make cleanup a part of their daily routine too. So don't do it for them every day. And this starts super young, like 2.5, 3 years old. and you at first have to do a lot of the cleaning up, let's be honest, but they're doing it with you. So maybe you make it a game. And as they get older, they just realize that that's the expectation and they play along a little bit better, especially if they want that iPad.
Right.
And so those are the things I found that work the most with the overwhelm in the playroom, because it can be super overwhelming.
It's funny because the way you're saying it, it actually puts me back to when our nanny was here, and she would do what you're describing in the sense of it would be the rule is like one thing out at a time. So for example, like Legos we had, in its own bag. And then if say my daughter Charlotte wanted to move on to the next, puzzle or whatever, the rule was, we have to first put away our Legos, and they come to know that. It's funny because if other people start watching your kids, you have to make sure that the people know, because our children would like exploit the fact that the whoever the babysitter or whoever's watching them, like a grandparent, doesn't know. So they'd be like, yes, I can take out all these things, but I like your keeping it up high so they can't get to it.
They have to ask for it.
They have to ask for it. And then, so kind of keeping everyone in your household, like, aligned on what the rules are and just being consistent. And then they get so used to it. And the other thing, going back to your point about, the daily cleanup, what I noticed with my kids is that we have to kind of like budget out like extra time to make sure that they're cleaning it. And so what we do is like say, okay, so instead of actually picking up the items, we would make sure we exercise our patience. We know it's going to be a 20-minute thing. It's not as fast, but we'd say, okay, I see this is out, this car needs to go over there. And so we kind of voice over and kind of walking them through it, but still making them do it.
Yeah.
And like putting on a cleanup song. There's like little tips and things that we've done. It's just, it's very validating to hear that that's like a really good system. I think we've kind of dropped off of that, and subsequently, things have probably gone a little sideways, but I do think that it's important to start them young and like get the system in place, because then it becomes easier.
100%. I feel like that's part of the load that moms carry, is that we're doing all of the things. And if I learned anything from the Montessori experience, it's that we really don't have to do all of it. We can train them, and we should train them to kind of take off some of the load and do their part. And whether it's a small part because it's age appropriate, that's really part of instilling, our values in them too.
It is. And it's funny you say that about doing the part. Like if you do kind of, instead of getting frustrated, like this happened a couple weeks back where I was getting really frustrated and overwhelmed and, having to like wait on the kids or do this. And then I said, wait a minute, how about if I come at this differently? And so what I did was I explained to them, because they're a little bit older now. My kids are still young, 3 and 4, but I said, listen, our home is like a ship. Okay. And so mommy and daddy might be the captains of the ship, but we're all on the ship and we all have our part to do. So as you guys get bigger, you guys can start to contribute and do your part. And so that our ship is like running smoothly and we all have a part to do.
I love.
And they were, versus, screaming at them and being frustrated, I kind of like stopped to explain, like, you guys can start to pitch in, and then remembering as they're growing to like hold them to that. And, I don't know, it's tricky, but, I
love that analogy, one, because I think it's a fun analogy for kids that they can grasp. And hey, what kid doesn't want to be a part of a ship, Yep. But two, I think it really, shows them what you're trying to say. You're not trying to ruin their day and be bossy and be the fun police. You just want the ship to run smoothly. And when the ship is running smoothly, then fun things happen.
Yeah, well, it's true. And they actually are like more excited. In fact, my son said the other day, Mommy, when we get home, he said, Mommy, when we get home tomorrow, when we get home from the beach and go to bed, then tomorrow when we wake up, I want to do chores. And I was like cracking up. I'm like, what on earth? So I think that if you can position,
you need to record that stuff.
Yeah, I know I need to record it. Right. But just getting them somehow motivated. And I love the idea of, getting
want to help. That's the thing.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
If you can engage them properly, I think that they do want to help. And I loved your idea about giving away before you receive, particularly around the holidays. And on that note, are there specific donation centers or places, your go-tos that you like to call? I know there's various organizations, but I know with COVID, it can be a little tricky. Are there any you would recommend, or any strategies that you have for hiring or maybe contacting a donation center at this time?
Yeah, so usually shelter and church related or affiliated donation centers stayed open during COVID. And they tend to be the ones that hurt the most for it. Because they actually give what they have directly to the community. Sometimes they'll have their own store where they sell some of the things too, but a lot of the times they're giving directly to the community that they're serving. Whereas Goodwill, which I think is a great organization as well, because they help employ people and give them job skills, but they don't necessarily give directly to the communities that need the things that you might be giving. So I always recommend finding a local shelter or church that is affiliated with helping the community in that way. They're usually going to stay open and they're going to need your donations. But what I like to remind clients too, that's really important, is you want to give them things that are in good shape. So if you could not resell it yourself or would not want to, most likely they don't need it either. So things that are damaged or not in great shape, those are not candidates for donation. Those need to be recycled, and there are great places to recycle clothing, like H&M. You can go to H&M and have your clothes that are stained or ripped, or underwear that you don't want to throw away, but you can't donate, and they recycle them for you. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know about that. And I'm really one of the things that really became, that I became aware of as an organizer is just how much stuff we get rid of. And how much is going in the landfills, or, it really started to kind of bother me. And so I wanted to find some alternatives to throwing things away and to recycling as best as we can. But not everything is a candidate for donation. So just keep that in mind. Not everything is a recycling candidate. And I feel like when I keep that in mind too, it also helps me to not purchase so much, because I'm thinking, is this worth having for a year for it to go sit in the landfill for 50 or 500 years? I love that. So I think that's also something to kind of keep in mind, and, it's helpful.
Yes. So how do you kind of go through the exercise of triaging? Let's just say, I'm just going to pick clothes, but it could be really anything. For example, my mom used to say, do a, give away, keep, and then we'll have to revisit, maybe, a yes, no, maybe pile, right? Yes, we keep it. No, we don't keep it, or we need to reevaluate and this needs more thought later. How do you kind of go through something and triage your different giveaways?
So I find that my clients have the hardest time with purging when they don't know how much they have. So the first step when you're actually editing is to empty out the space and to put your items together. So when you see maybe 10 black shirts in between some white shirts, some blue shirts, some, gray shirts and purple or whatever, it doesn't really look like that many. But when you put 10 shirts together that are basically the same or not that different, you're like, do I really need 10 of these shirts? And then it's much easier to edit in a way that you're actually being honest with yourself. And I always tell my clients, it's not really yes, no, maybe. It's hell yes, can't live without it, love it. If it's not a hell yes, then it's either a no, never going to touch that again, never have worn it, never will wear it, most likely. That goes for sure. And then the maybe stuff is that, well, I need this though. we don't ski every summer or every winter, but we do go skiing and I don't want to buy ski clothes every time. So I need this. Or, well, I don't love this swimsuit and the way it looks on me, but I need to have a swimsuit. So it's the love, need, and use. And the love is the hell yes stuff. The maybe stuff is the need and use stuff. And then the rest of the stuff is unnecessary. And those should be easy no's and giveaways or purges.
That's so helpful. And I love too what you were saying about kind of get all the same category together so that you can look at the total population. For example, look at all of your shirts, group them, look at them, and then triage. That's a really helpful first step.
Did you ever see that show, the Marie Kondo show, where on Netflix?
Yes.
So she basically really uses that system where she makes them get all their books together. She doesn't ask them to look at their books in this room and then go in that room and look at that book. She says, put them all in a pile on the bed.
Right, by category, right.
For that reason, so you can understand the gravity of how much you actually have consumed and how much you're holding on to in that particular category. And then you can be really honest.
That is very true. And I did not connect the dots, but you're right. That is exactly how Marie Kondo does it, by category.
Yeah. It's kind of the fairy godmother of my industry.
Yes. Gosh, now you're making me want to go watch more of her and get even more inspired.
She's great.
And so how about how do we, let's say that, okay, we've actually committed to this exercise. We have done, let's say, our twice yearly, I'll say purge or cleanup exercise. How do you and your family kind of continue to maintain it? And I know you kind of hit on this probably for the playroom. What are some other really good tips that you have just to continue staying organized on a daily basis?
Yeah. So organizing to me is actually a 3-step process. So the first step is decluttering or editing. And that one's the easiest step in my opinion. And it's the most crucial. Will do 90% of the heavy lifting for you. And then the rest of it is to create a system for the things that you have. And usually, in my opinion, systems are best created with the right containers. Or putting things, so creating zones for that particular activity or category. And then the third part of organization system is the maintenance. And those are your tidy habits. And they are the things that you do daily, weekly, annually. And, this is a thing about organization that I think is a different point of view that I have from maybe other organizers. I am a recovering perfectionist. So what I've learned about that, though, is that perfectionism doesn't get stuff done. And so it actually leads to procrastination a lot of times because you're like, I can't do that the way I want to, so I'm just not going to do that right now. But done is better than perfect. And so I really like to tell moms especially to focus on done, not perfect. Forget about the color coding, forget about, the perfect labels, forget about the perfect bin. Think more along the lines of the system and then your tidying habits. And so I'll share one of my tidy habits that I have. I don't have a lot that I do every single day. I'm a busy mom. I own a business. I have hobbies that don't include organizing. I don't want to be organizing all day. And so I have a couple things in place that help me stay or keep my space tidy. And the number one thing that I think that I do that is really helpful is I have what's called a tidy bin. So we have an upstairs, downstairs, but this can work on a single story too, because usually your the hub of your home, which is the kitchen, entry, and family room, is kind of what I consider the hub. So I have a tidy bin that sits at the bottom of my stairs, and throughout the day, as I have things that need to go back upstairs, I just put them in that bin. So I'm not running upstairs 10 times a day, disrupting my day, but they're also not sitting out where they don't belong. So right now there's a headband my daughter left downstairs. There is a pair of nail clippers. There's a throw that needs to be washed because my son spilled something on it. So these are things that all need to go upstairs, right? And so what I do is at the end of the day, I take this bin upstairs with me when I'm doing bedtime routine and I empty it upstairs. I take 5 minutes to put the things back where they go. So that throw's going to go in the laundry room. The headband's going in my daughter's bathroom. The nail clippers are going in our linen closet, with the personal care items. And things are just going back where they need to go. So a lot of times when things get disorganized, it's because things don't belong there, but they stay there because you don't make time to put them away. So this bin really helps that. And then what I do is I take that bin, and in the morning when I do a 5-minute tidy up upstairs, I put all the things in the bin that need to go back downstairs that somehow got upstairs that didn't need to be there. And I spend 5 minutes putting things away in the morning. So it's really like altogether a 10 or 15 minute tidying session that I do between the upstairs and the downstairs. And it just really saves me from having a bunch of things that don't belong all over the house.
That is so smart. And how big would you say your tidy bin is? Because I know that there's probably all kinds of odd items that go in and out of that bin.
So it's in my home. So it's, kind of a part of the decor. I didn't want it to look, it's not like a laundry basket, but it is the size of a small laundry basket, but it's wicker, it's decorative. And so it's pretty. So it just sits at the very bottom. And when my son was actually really little, because his favorite thing to do was to empty it out, I would hang it because it had a handle on the banister corner. Oh. But now that he's a little bit older, I don't have to do that. He's 2.5 now. But when he was 1 and I had it on the ground, that was his favorite thing to do, was to crawl over to it and just empty it all out, throwing everything over his head. So
I love it. And do you keep it at the bottom of your staircase, or where do you keep your tidy bin?
I keep the tidy bin at the bottom of the staircase, and then overnight it stays at the top of the staircase so that in the morning I can throw everything in there that needs to go back downstairs.
Oh, I love that. And it keeps you from like getting sore and going up and down or just leaving it and forgetting it.
Right. Or getting distracted, right? Because I can't stop what I'm doing every 10 seconds to tidy my house. Like that's just not going to happen. But I can't just leave it all over all the time, or I'm going to have a big mess to clean up. And I don't want to do that either.
I love that. So do you have, as I think about maybe one more room, the kitchen, is there any maybe hot tips? Sometimes you walk into someone's home and it looks like it's a model home and like as if nobody's even eaten there. And meanwhile, there's a family of 5 or something. Like what are some of just maybe your top tips for keeping a kitchen together?
Well, it's really funny that you said that, because I would say that 90% of my clients, I walk into their house for the consultation and I look around, I'm like, why am I here? Really? This looks perfect. And then they start opening closets and cabinets and drawers. And I'm like, oh, this is why I'm here. So a lot of times what ends up happening is the systems that you have within your space are actually lacking. So every drawer becomes a junk drawer somehow. Cabinets become really jumbled. Closets become, a mess. And it's because you lack the systems within your enclosed spaces. So in a kitchen in particular, this becomes a problem when you don't create zones. So I always tell, when I'm working with my clients and I'm telling them to maintain it, I always ask them to think of it as zones. So, where are all the cups? Let's keep all those together. Let's find a space that can hold all of them. Where should all of the bowls go? And, you wouldn't really put the bowls away from maybe like the pantry area, and you wouldn't put the cups away from the sink or the refrigerator where you would refill. So you kind of think about how you utilize the space. And then I always tell my clients to be ruthless in their purging in their kitchen space, especially with, containers and lids. They're like socks. You can never seem to keep them together. They're not going to magically appear. You need to just get rid of the container that doesn't have the lid, or you need to get rid of the extra 10 lids that you no longer know where the container is. And so I tell my clients to be kind of ruthless, purging that. And I'll give you a freebie that you can give to your clients too, of the 5 things that I suggest you remove in every space, like no brainer, easy to toss. Like one of them in the kitchen is, lids without mates, or vice versa, containers without the lids. Yeah. And then I always recommend, try and get rid of the cup that you got at 7-Eleven for the big gulp, or, the Dodgers cup that you got that you really don't care, but you had to buy it to get the drink or whatever it is, or the Rubio's cup that they give you.
Yes,
yes. You know what I mean? So I always recommend stuff like that.
And I love these ideas. I love that you're saying that, having that practical, functional system behind the cabinets and behind the kitchen so that you can put everything away and it's useful and it makes sense. That's just, it's something to think about for sure. And yes, I will post your freebies in our podcast notes. I'm sure folks would absolutely love that.
Yeah. And I don't know if this will be too late for this particular episode, but on the 5th, I am doing a kitchen makeover, a little pop-up group to motivate people to go through their kitchen and edit out the things that they don't need, and how to create a few simple systems within the kitchen that will help them be more efficient. So,
October 5th. Okay. So this sounds excellent. So how can folks join that if they're interested in joining your pop-up group?
So if they go to my website, there is a link for the pop-up group. And right now I'm tweaking 1 or 2 things on that link. I actually didn't realize that when I transferred my website, I didn't connect it correctly. So I'll have that up, in the next day and before this podcast is released.
Awesome. And so it's, your website is sortedbliss.com. Is that right?
That is. Yeah.
Great. I think it's so interesting that after 10 years of doing this in person, you've kind of created this online space to connect with more people. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about how you can help others that are listening and some of the services you provide and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I started my business accidentally 10 years ago as a service-based business. And like I said, I fell in love with it, and I still love working with clients one-on-one. But what I also realized is that there's only so many people that I can reach and help. And I feel that the market is missing maybe that more practical side of organizing that makes it more available to everyday moms. I know that, you can get a great Martha Stewart book or some of the other people in my industry who have some really beautiful organization to look at and to implement, but sometimes it's not always practical. And so I wanted to make organization really practical. And I think also organization is something that you should do regularly. And so I want to create a community for moms who don't have a lot of time to apply to this, but they want to regularly work towards it. And so that kind of is the pivot that I decided to make recently. And I've had a lot of great feedback about it. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I can tell you, I think that is so great. That is, that's really something that the market is missing. It feels like as a mom, a working mom, especially managing this household, it is hard to kind of go from going by yourself, or you have to pay a lot of money for someone to come in your home, and there's really not an in-between. And I love that you're closing that gap with your pop-up group and your services, and you do virtual consulting as well. Is that right? So if someone wants
that is
one-on-one.
Yeah. And, something really interesting happened when I started doing virtual work. So I started thinking about it a couple years ago when I had my second, and it was just harder and harder to leave the house. Mm-hmm. But when COVID happened, it became a reality, right? Because I couldn't, one, my kids needed me at home. My daughter, all of a sudden I was a teacher's aide. And second of all, I couldn't work in people's homes safely. And it was illegal here in California anyways. So I started thinking then, I had clients who were reaching out to me, well, maybe now is the time to release virtual services. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that my clients don't necessarily do it exactly the way I would, but they're doing it better because they actually have so much more input. Before it was a very white glove service. I would do all of the purging and all of the sorting for them. And they would just go through and say, I don't want this. I want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And then I'd go purchase all of the bins and I would make all of the systems for them and do all of the labeling. And so it was very white glove. They didn't have to do a whole lot. But now they have to be a part of the process. And so they are able to upkeep it so much easier because they understand the ins and outs of why they are putting something where they're putting it and how it should really be to keep it easier for them. So I find that there's a credible benefit to being more hands-on. That
is so interesting. And so if someone does join the pop-up group, what exactly does that look like?
So I will be going over the 3 steps in the pop-up group. The first one will be the editing or the decluttering. And then the second step will be creating a few simple systems to maintain, have function in the space. And then the third is the tidy habits to maintain the space. And it's going to be a 5-day pop-up group. And you're going to work on one step at a time. The first day is going to be a little bit more around the vision of the space, and just kind of getting them warmed up to kind of thinking about their space a little bit differently and how they would rather use it than how they are currently using it. Or what they would like the transformation to look like. And then the second, third, and fourth day will be actual implementing. And then the 5th day will be a day for them to get feedback from me. So on their space.
And I love that because then it kind of gives you that extra support or the extra push you may not have on your own, as well as your guidance of like kind of you stepping somebody or the group through it. So I just love that idea. It sounds like,
and I'll be giving my favorite like tips and my favorite products to use in a kitchen, the things that I think are worth buying, the things that I think you should kind of stay away from that end up becoming part of the clutter too. And then giving some direct feedback where people can post, okay, this is what it looks like. This is still my problem, or even being proud of themselves and just saying, look at what I did. This is the transformation. Because people are so proud of themselves when they do something.
Well, it's a lot of work and it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to a lot of people. So to have that kind of guidance and community around you as you're doing it definitely builds the momentum and really gives people the extra push that they really need to get it done. And I love that you can celebrate your success too, kind of just, sharing what you've done, which is so neat.
Yeah, because a lot of people think that organizing is one of those things that you're either born with or you're not. And I actually don't think that's true. I think that it can be a little bit of both. It's really whatever you're interested in is what you become good at, right? So if you just put a little interest in it, then, you can actually do pretty well for yourself in that area.
I love it. Okay. So have everyone go check out your website, sortedbliss.com, to find out more about the pop-up group. And where can folks find you on social?
So I mostly hang out on Instagram at Sorted Bliss.
All right, that is it for today. Now, as you know, some of our best conversations actually happen after the show. So I want you to find me on Instagram at Kimberly Lovey and let me know your thoughts about today's show. You can screenshot this episode and let us know what your biggest takeaway was and tag me at Kimberly Lovey and we can share it on our stories. I will see you again, same time, same place next week.